The Colombian Senate continues to debate on the motion of censure against Defense Minister Diego Molano for his role in the violent state repression of anti-government protesters. A powerful cyclone is headed for eastern India, forcing the evacuation of nearly 2 million people. The negotiations to save the nuclear deal between Iran and world powers resumed in the Austrian capital this Tuesday. From the headquarters of teleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South, and I'm Katrina Goss. After more than 6 hours of debate on Monday, the President of Colombia's Senate, Arturo Char, adjourned the plenary session on the motion of censure against Minister of Defense Diego Molano, which continues this Tuesday. Among the senators who participated in the debate on Monday, Ivan Cepeda, representing the Democratic Pole Party, pointed to the minister as responsible for the multiple crimes against humanity perpetrated by members of the security forces during the demonstrations against the government of President Ivan Duque over the past few weeks. For his part, the minister argued that the police did not initiate the violence and claimed that as a member of the government, he respects the right to protest. Colombia, immersed in a deep social and political crisis, has been the scene of anti-government protests for weeks that have been brutally repressed by the security forces, leaving more than 50 dead, thousands injured and hundreds missing across the country. The National Strike Committee and the Colombian government reached pre-agreements late on Monday, which the government said it hopes will lead to talks to end almost a month of widespread protests. Following a 12-hour meeting, both sides stated that there are points in which there is still no consensus, which will be later in the process. The National Strike Committee, made up of unions and student groups, has repeatedly expressed its willingness to enter talks to bring an end to the ongoing mobilizations, but the talks held thus far have failed to make any major progress, given the government's refusal to address the main concerns raised by the population and bring a stop to the brutal repression by security forces against protesters who have been mobilizing throughout the country since April 28th to denounce the neoliberal policies of the Ivan Duque government. And Colombian President Ivan Duque has appointed current Deputy Minister of Agriculture Juan Camilo Restrepo Gomez as his government's High Commissioner for Peace. The appointment comes after the resignation of Miguel Ceballos, in charge of the recent failed negotiations between the Duque government and the National Strike Committee. Ceballos cited personal reasons for his decision, including the calls of his conscience. Since the beginning of the current crisis, Duque has replaced 3 ministers, and the loss of the High Commissioner has added to his administration's perceived weakness. Meanwhile, it should be recalled that Juan Camilo Restrepo Gomez opposed the 2016 peace accords with the former FARC guerrillas. And Colombian human rights organizations have revealed several locations that are believed to have been used by agents of the mobile anti-riot squadron to detain, torture and force the disappearance of protesters in the city of Cali. The organizations announced that Cali's Municipal Administrative Center is used by the police as a secret operations center. According to the information, since May 13th, the police have been detaining demonstrators in the facility's basements, where they've been tortured and even killed, with their bodies taken out in vans hours later. A report notes that the bodies were transported to Malala municipality to be dumped in a mass grave. The organizations also received complaints about the existence of mass graves in rural areas of the municipalities of Buga and Yumbo. The organizations urged the government, the Institute of Forensic Medicine and the Missing Persons Search Unit to initiate an investigation into the events immediately, recalling that at least 150 people have disappeared in the city since April 28th. Studies released by the United Nations reveal that poverty in Latin America has reached its highest level in 20 years, with a 12.5% decline in the quality of life of the region's inhabitants. According to research by UN experts, the negative indicators in Latin America soared under the effect of the COVID-19 pandemic, where up to 26.1% of the population could not cover their food needs. According to the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, poverty and extreme poverty in 2020 reached levels not seen in the last 12 and 20 years respectively. There was also a worsening of inequality indices and soaring rates of unemployment, especially among women, which reached figures of almost 40%. "16 people were killed in an attack in the eastern province of Satipo in Peru. Police authorities have blamed criminals linked to drug trafficking, while the Ministry of Defense points to an alleged terrorist attack by the Shining Path movement. Despite the claims by the Ministry of Defense, the evidence and investigations collected by the police forces point to the clear participation of drug trafficking gangs that operate in the valley of the Apurímac, Eni and Mantaro rivers, a region of the Peruvian Amazon. Several political and social sectors have denounced the massacre, among them presidential candidate Pedro Castillo, who urged the police to find the whereabouts of those responsible. Likewise, his far-right contender Keiko Fujimori expressed her solidarity with the families of the victims. The attack came just 2 weeks before the presidential election. The United Nations also condemned the violence. And this Tuesday, the Justice and Human Rights Commission of the Peruvian Congress summoned representatives of the Ministries of Defense, the Interior, Justice and Human Rights and the Public Prosecutor's Office to be informed on the measures taken following the massacre in Satipo province. The extraordinary session is set to hear from the authorities regarding the response to and investigation of the incident on Wednesday afternoon. Guillermo Lasso took office as President of Ecuador on Monday after being elected on April 11th. The inauguration ceremony took place in the National Museum. Lasso replaces Lenin Moreno as President, who was heavily criticised during his term in office for the neoliberal measures implemented, including a return to huge debt with the IMF and the violent repression of protests against his government by the security forces. 90% of the population condemned his handling of the COVID-19 epidemic. Lasso is expected to follow a similar policy. Only a few presidents attended the ceremony. And we'll be right back after this very short break, so don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. A powerful cyclone headed for eastern India on Tuesday, forcing the evacuation of nearly 2 million people, just a week after another huge storm claimed at least 155 lives on the west coast. Cyclone Yas is expected to slam into West Bengal and Odisha states around midday on Wednesday, according to the Indian Met Department, and could bring winds of up to 165 kilometers per hour. Nearly 2 million people living along India's east coast are being moved to shelters, officials explained, and the storm has also disrupted efforts to combat the country's devastating COVID-19 outbreak. Thousands of disaster and relief personnel have also been deployed. Some vaccination centres in districts under threat, as well as the capital of West Bengal state, Kolkata, are set to suspend operations, and efforts are underway to ensure the supply of oxygen and medicines to hospitals during the storm. India's COVID-19 tally rose to over 27 million on Tuesday as the nation continues to struggle to curb the spread of the virus despite a fall in new cases. According to the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, the figures show that new cases of COVID-19 have fallen below 200,000 for the first time since April 14th. However, there are still over 2 million active cases in the country and over 3,500 COVID-19 related deaths were recorded in the past 24 hours. Meanwhile, experts warn the official numbers fall short of the reality, and several nations are battling a new variant of the coronavirus originally discovered in the country. The governments of Mexico and Argentina are making progress in the production of vaccines against COVID-19, which will benefit the people of Latin America and the Caribbean. Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador, speaking at his morning press conference on Tuesday, informed that alongside Argentina, Mexico is producing the vaccine developed by the Swedish-British pharmaceutical company AstraZeneca and Oxford University. The president noted that enough doses are being produced to distribute across the region. He also clarified that this is the result of an agreement signed last August to transport the active ingredient being produced in Argentina to Mexico, where it's packaged before its final distribution.
We are working together in several fields and in a very remarkable way in retaliation to health and vaccination. We are producing the AstraZeneca vaccine in collaboration with the Oxford University, the government of Argentina, the government of Mexico, and the Carlos Slim Foundation.
Haiti's government imposed a nightly curfew and other restrictions on Monday under an 8-day health emergency meant to cut the spread of the coronavirus. All outdoor activity will be banned from 10 p.m. until 5 a.m. under the decree issued by President Jovenel Moïse. The decree also makes the use of face masks mandatory in public, while temperature checks and hand-washing stations are required for all public or private buildings such as banks, schools, hospitals and markets. Social distancing in public places is set at 1.5 metres. The President also ordered public institutions to reduce on-duty staff by 50%, while he encouraged other employees to work from home. The move comes as the country battles a surge in coronavirus cases, which has pushed its weak health system to the limit.
The number of COVID-19 cases confirmed from the last 72 hours is 302 cases, 65 hospitalizations, 15 deaths. I insist on saying that this is institutional number from COVID patients' deaths in hospitals, but more people may have died at home elsewhere. If there is not a lower number after the 8 days measures, we will have to take very drastic measures in the coming days.
International non-governmental organisation Oxfam presented a report in Havana on Tuesday revealing the impact of nearly 6 decades of sanctions imposed by successive US governments on the Cuban population and underlining the consequences of the blockade on the daily lives of Cubans, particularly women. The report, titled Right to Live Without a Blockade, states that 78% of girls and women living on the island were born under US sanctions, many of them in force since 1962. In addition, 46% of women in Cuba are also heads of households, which means they hold jobs to make a living income away from the home. They're also the majority of the specialised workforce, and in fields such as health, they represent those who work in the sector. The Oxfam report is based in part on information provided by the Center for Cuban Economy of the University of Havana and features testimonies that illustrate the consequences of the blockade on the daily lives of all people in Cuba, especially women.
In Cuba has been limited by the embargo of the United States in several opportunities, even during and even more during the response to humanitarian crisis. For example, hurricanes, the tornado a couple of years ago, and the COVID and the pandemic, the COVID-19. I will have the opportunity to speak to the new administration, to President Biden, to Vice President Harris. I will say you have a unique opportunities today. After more than 1 year of pandemic of the COVID-19, after almost 60 years of sanctions against Cuba, today you have the opportunity to change the history. Vice President Harris, you're the first woman to have this role in the United States. Women and young women are the most affected by the embargo in Cuba.
Tremors continued in the Democratic Republic of the Congo city of Goma this Tuesday, sparking further concern among residents still reeling from the volcanic eruption that occurred over the weekend. Mount Nyiragongo, one of the world's most active and dangerous volcanoes, erupted on Saturday evening, sending lava downhill towards the city. The eruption destroyed nearby villages, displaced thousands and killed at least 32 people. Goma, a city of 1.5 million people, was on edge as violent aftershocks continued through the night. According to the Rwanda Seismic Monitor, strong aftershocks were recorded on Monday, including a 5.1 magnitude quake. Red Cross and UNICEF personnel, as well as government officials, are working to reunite families as more than 100 children remain missing after having been separated from their parents. Cracks appeared on the ground in the eastern city of Goma on Tuesday, measuring up to several hundred meters long and several dozen centimeters across. The cracks opened up as the city was hit by tremors from Mount Nyiragongo around a dozen kilometers away. The longer crack ran from Mount Goma, which marks the city's northern perimeter, to the main hospital and the banks of Lake Kivu. The shorter crack, around 100 meters long, appeared near Goma Airport on the northeastern side of the city, on the surface of the main highway from Goma to Butembo. And we have more stories coming up after this final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. The negotiations to save the nuclear deal between Iran and world powers resumed in Vienna this Tuesday. The talks aimed at bringing the United States back to the deal after former President Donald Trump unilaterally withdrew in 2018 and reimposed sanctions on Iran are being held at a hotel in the Austrian capital and attended by representatives of Germany, China, France, the United Kingdom, Russia and Iran. The talks are coordinated by Spanish diplomat Enrique Mora on behalf of the European Union. The negotiations to save the pact began in early April, and this new session came a day after Iran and the International Atomic Energy Agency extended the agreement to allow inspections of the Islamic Republic's nuclear program for another month. Iran has stressed that it's ready to return to its commitments under the deal as soon as the United States lifts all sanctions and without any conditions. Chinese President Xi Jinping reiterated his country's support for Iran's reasonable demands concerning a return to commitments under the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action or nuclear deal. The president held a telephone conversation with his Iranian counterpart Hassan Rouhani, in which he also stressed that China will continue to support Iran in efforts to fight the COVID-19 epidemic and condemn the unilateral sanctions imposed by the United States against Iran. Meanwhile, the Iranian president thanked China for its support in the negotiations for a return to the Comprehensive Plan of Action, as well as its support in tackling COVID-19. Syrian authorities are making the final preparations for the presidential election to be held on Wednesday. To the Interior Minister, everything is in place to ensure a smooth election day. 100 polling stations have been set up in all cities and regions of the country, and over 18 million citizens inside and outside Syria are eligible to cast their vote. Campaigns have concluded as the pre-election silence period has begun. Current President Bashar al-Assad is widely expected to win a fourth term in office. Palestinian authorities released the final death toll from the 11-day Israeli military onslaught against the occupied and blockaded Gaza Strip on Monday. According to the Health Ministry, the death toll rose to 253, including 66 children, 39 women, 17 elderly people. Nearly 2,000 people were injured in Israel's latest attack on Palestinians living in the Strip. After the declaration of a ceasefire, as a result of Palestinian resistance and international pressure, the Palestinian people are preparing to once again rebuild and mourning their lost loved ones. On Tuesday, activists gathered to begin collecting the rubble and debris of buildings that were destroyed in the Israeli regime's strikes. As US Secretary of State Antony Blinken began a tour of the Middle East this Tuesday, the Palestinian resistance movement Hamas stressed that the United States must put pressure on Israel to stop its crimes against the Palestinian people.
What is asked from the visit of the US Secretary of State is to show a clear US position in the face of the Zionist aggression against our people and our holy sites, as well as to stop supporting the occupation and giving it a cover to continue its aggressive behavior, whether in Jerusalem or the Gaza Strip. All parties that seek to stabilize calm in the Gaza Strip must put pressure on the Zionist occupation, which caused the situation in the region to explode during the recent escalation that targeted Jerusalem and the Gaza Strip. The policy of the US has long been known, and it is a policy that has always supported the Zionist entity. The US see the Zionist entity as the only entity worth supporting. They do not stand with the oppressed, but rather with the oppressor.
On Tuesday, Jordanian Foreign Minister Ayman Safadi held a press conference with his Palestinian counterpart Riyad al-Maliki after meeting with Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas in Ramallah.
The way to the permanent armistice is to find a political horizon and solve the basis of the conflict by the continuation of the occupation and the failure to reach a two-state solution. If we want to prevent the conflict from erupting again, and if we want to preserve this calm, the causes that trigger the conflict must be addressed in the beginning and work on a basic solution conflict, which is the occupation and deprivation of the borderly Palestinian people of their rights. The issue of reconstruction in the Gaza Strip must be an integral part of a perception and of a clearer, more comprehensive and larger plan, which also includes talking about a political path that takes us out of this recurring and continuous situation over the past years, to a political horizon that allows for a return to negotiations according to the international references adopted in order to end occupation and establishment of the independent Palestinian state, with East Jerusalem as its capital.
Egypt's chief diplomat met with his Qatari counterpart in Cairo on Tuesday as ties between the two nations gradually improve after Egypt and 3 Gulf countries ended their dispute with the energy-rich neighbour. Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry received Qatari Foreign Minister Mohammed bin Abdulrahman Al Thani in the Egyptian capital, where they discussed bilateral ties and regional and international issues. Al Thani arrived in Cairo late Monday following a visit to Khartoum, where he met with Sudanese officials after earlier travelling to Libya. In January, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain ended their dispute with Qatar, which started in 2017 and included the 4 countries severing their diplomatic and economic ties with the nation. Now we've come to the end of this news brief, but remember you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also follow us for all the latest news on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and Telegram. And you can catch up on our shows on our YouTube channel. For TeleSUR English, I'm Katrina Goss. Thank you for watching.